Happy Friday, Christy.
Happy Friday.
So let's see here. What is StreamYard's telling me? It's having trouble streaming to Instagram. Well, Instagram folks, not sure I can help you. Sorry about that. We are live.
Do we know how many people join us from like LinkedIn versus Instagram versus wherever?
Yeah, you know what? So I don't know the specifics on Instagram and Facebook, but we do. So when I click go live, we're streaming now to LinkedIn. So hello, LinkedIn. We're streaming to the FinLocker Facebook page. We're streaming to the Brian Vieaux Facebook page. Hi, Mom. We're supposed to be streaming to the FinLocker Instagram page. And by the way, Christy, we could stream to your personal pages as well if we wanted.
We could. That would be fun.
Yeah, let's do that next time around. But to answer your question, I don't see good metrics on the platforms, Facebook, Instagram, but on LinkedIn, we've been averaging somewhere between 35 and 50 people live. So live during this 1 p.m. Eastern 30-minute show. And then the cool part of the algorithm for LinkedIn is each show has been averaging 10 to 15 times the unique viewers for the next 3 to 4 days following this 30-minute live. So that's the benefit of the LinkedIn platform is it, over the course of the afternoon today into the weekend, the algorithm will drop this into other people's feeds. So that's cool.
Yeah, my hypothesis was going to be that LinkedIn was the highest viewing channel for this type of content.
I think so. I think, yes, I think that is true. And I think what Robbie and I were talking about before we went live was trying to figure out a way as great as that reach is on LinkedIn, the downside is there's no such thing as a recurring event on LinkedIn. So it gets difficult to schedule, for people to remember to go look at or sign up or whatever you want, register for next week's show. So this is a PSA for all of you that are watching. Go register on LinkedIn for the show next week.
Well, and I think that's a good segue into like what we do every day. When you think about how do we interact and engage with our customers and with our referral partners, we have to think about the convenience and ease for them, right? Like, so for us, we were just talking about which platform is the most engaging and how the content gets engaged with, how many are live versus the replays. Because if we only did live and there was a no replay, it wouldn't be as valuable. If we know that not having a way to do recurring scheduling is limiting for some folks. And so now if you translate that into our day-to-day business, then that really tells us, hey, we've got to think about it from those other person's perspectives. And how is what we're saying landing? How are they understanding and receiving the message?
Right. I think I love that because if I spend a lot of time mentally in this zone of thinking about the loan officer, right? And what they go through, what they do, and how they're showing up for their clients and partners. And so it's probably there's a lot of parallels here for that cohort of professionals. And I think doing what we're doing and doing it on multi-platforms so that we can potentially meet our audience where they are intuitively feels like the right thing to do, right? But yet we just talked for the first few minutes about the difficulties that people are having finding us because there's not like a single place to capture all this. And so it feels like there's a tech opportunity potentially out there to kind of wrangle all this together. But if I'm a loan officer and I'm thinking about how I'm showing up, where I'm showing up, what value and how I'm delivering value, and let's just say it's in the form of education content, you loan officers need to be thinking about how to also be efficient. Because what's cool about what we're doing here, we're going to do this show for 30 minutes. It's going to live on for ever, I guess, on LinkedIn. So it becomes an on-demand type piece of content, right? And that's how I think loan officers should be thinking about the content that they're creating. And I'm not saying don't do live in-person training and education. I'm not saying don't do live webinar / Zoom / Teams, however you're doing it. But if you're taking the time to do those types of events, think about how to leverage the work you are putting into preparing and then the output that you're creating during the event to repurpose it and have it live on in this on-demand kind of world we live in, where people can come and consume it when they're able and ready to.
Well, and the other piece to that, which you've talked about before, is what type of content are you putting out? I know that this group, and by group I mean not just those of us who are live today, but everybody who's a part of this show in the front and in the back. Every week we're getting together talking about what type of content do we think people will find valuable? What's going on in the world? How does it relate? And we weed through a lot of stuff that never makes it on air, because we hope that what we're doing is landing with folks. And you've got to think about that the same way for your audience. So are you speaking to referral partners? Are you speaking to borrowers? And what's most relevant? How are they dealing with the mortgage rates going up when the Fed cut them?
Right.
And the data that's coming out. I mean, that's a key point. I think a lot of loan officers are a little disappointed. I know I'm disappointed in where rates are given where we are at this point in the year and what the expectations were from forecasts.
Disappointed or surprised or a little bit of both?
Well, it's hard to be surprised at this point because there's been so much conversation around it.
Right.
If compared to where I thought we were going to be, it is a little bit of a shock when you look at the forecasting and you go back and you look at the MBA forecasts and Fannie and Freddie forecasts. We're pretty far off from not only the numbers, but the interest rate, which probably makes, as a loan officer, your internal forecasts off. I know it makes mine as a leader. My forecasts were a little off because I don't think I'm smarter than Doug Duncan and Mike Fratantoni. So I wanted to have their input. And by having that, I base my forecasts off of them and my budget.
So let me pivot a little bit with that, because I think the delta between forecast expected and then what happened and what we're dealing with actually creates an opportunity for the loan officer. And what do I mean by that? This week has been an interesting week as it relates to this topic. I was in an offsite, and this was like the 90-minute conversation was dealing with the headlines, the clickbait, with the Fed's dropping rates. And even if you just, if you're peeking at, national news shows or morning, news edutainment shows, the headlines were never what the mortgage rates were. It was just this generic rates have dropped, and it's going to create these refi opportunities. Well, that I actually look at that from a loan officer perspective, who's educated, right? Who takes the time to really understand the connection between what the Feds are doing and then what happens at the street level with rates. And then the loan officers that can take that and now be a rational source of education for their communities, I think create an opportunity to build trust. It doesn't help the fact that they're not going to change rates, but they can at least be that source of education. And I think the more as loan officers that we lead with education across the entire spectrum of our business, the better chances we have to win when it's time to win, right?
Look, you're exactly right. That goes back to that content creation we started the show with today. What are you delivering and what value is it bringing? And so you do have an opportunity to create that. You have an opportunity when you can talk about what each of the presidential candidates has put forward for a housing plan. I don't like to get political, but as somebody who's in the housing industry you have an obligation to say, hey, here are the key points, and here's what I think about those particular points.
Yep.
Are we shy, 3 million housing units? Yeah, probably. But what do those housing units need to look like, and who's best suited to put those there? And how would you deal with that locally? So if you just take that one topic, go and research and find out in your community how many houses your realtors think that you are short. And then what are some good proposals in the local area? Because to me, housing is location, 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 and local, local, local. So how can you be a part of the solution and talk about these things? Because nationally they're important and people are looking at that, but the impact happens locally.
Love that. And that is the every real estate class I've ever listened into. I mean, I had a people probably don't know this, but I had a real estate license back in the 90s into the 2000s, not because I ever practiced real estate. I never was involved with a transaction, but back in the 90s, the mortgage company I was with, in order for the company to have a lending license in the state of California, somebody had to have a real estate license.
Yeah.
So I drew the short straw. This is a good little trip down memory lane. I should try to find some pictures of this. I remember it was like one of my very first business trips ever. And so I flew into Los Angeles and then literally landed and then was going to go sit for this exam, somewhere in downtown LA and probably some municipal building. And so I'm like, well, I'll just take the bus from LAX downtown. And so for those that are familiar with that part of the world, and if you think about a bus route from LAX to downtown LA in the early to mid 90s, we went through some very interesting neighborhoods, areas. And I'm like, what am I doing? But so I wish I would have loved to have had this thing back then to kind of chronicle the travels. But that, all the way through that, training and education around real estate in the 90s, and it still holds true today. It is all about location, right? That's the primary driver, frankly, of real estate is location.
No, completely agree. And you think about location, think about what's happening in a lot of the markets. We have Tampa that's just been hit by 2 hurricanes. So if you read Mike Simonson's data, transaction activity there has slowed to 0.
Right.
Because houses are underwater. Also, there's no electricity. Roads are impassable. That market looks a lot different right this very minute than it did even a couple of weeks ago. And how are we reacting to that as industry leaders? What are we still doing? We don't want to forget the folks in Western North Carolina that just had massive impact, because who expects a flood in the Appalachian Mountains?
Right.
That's not, a hurricane. That's not what you're expecting.
With flooding after, right?
Right. With the deluge of rain. I saw a report that said in the short time that Milton was across the state of Florida, it dumped as much rain as Helene did in the lengthy period of time that it was there, which is a tremendous amount of rain and water that they're dealing with, in addition to, thankfully, the lower hurricane force winds that they received. But that goes back into the topic of what's happening with climate change, what's happening to the insurance rates that folks are having to pay. Many of you know, I still have a home in South Georgia on the coast. And my neighborhood community has a Facebook group, and the number of people in that group talking about their insurance carrier has decided to no longer write policies. They're just getting out of all coastal property and anything that has hurricane risk, because of just the losses that they're expecting to take from just these 2 storms.
Yeah. So before you and I went live, we were talking about my lovely hometown of Detroit, Michigan, and we don't have hurricanes yet. We haven't had to worry about floods and flooding and wildfires and all that. And so again, location. It's going to be fascinating to just watch the consumer, what the consumer starts to think about around where they want to live, especially first-time home buyers. KP keeps trying to pop on here, but KP, we didn't build this set for three of us. Sorry, man, can't let you in.
It makes that weird blue line. Well, you think about it now. What's happening to your insurance in that area? Are you going up? Like, what's happening?
It's marginally increased. It's nothing that I would tell you that it's nothing yet that is impacting the affordability, right? The affordability of a home, because now you start talking about the cost of insurance in the markets that we were just talking about, and now overlay that with first-time home buyers. That's really impacting affordability. Apparently, am I having a bad hair day? I'm getting shredded on LinkedIn here. I have a bad hair day every day, so I don't really care.
Who was it? One of the economists put out a thing about when you're going to have a bad hair day and when you're not, and what areas have the most bad hair days. The coast is very different.
I have hair, and I don't know how we're getting into a hair segment, but I have hair that doesn't grow long; it grows wide. So I know I'm due for a haircut when my head starts to square off, which it apparently is doing right now.
You and my husband, his hair does the same thing. It grows out and straight up, not down.
This is going to be a test. This will be a test for the LinkedIn algorithm if it likes bad hair. So.
Do we need a hair segment? No, but we do need to talk about jobs, because when you think about not even talking about the data that has come out, just talking about people's individual experience with maybe they want to choose to live somewhere like you do, Brian, in lovely Detroit, where the summers are great, but the winters are, as you noted, less brutal due to climate change.
Right.
But a lot of the jobs that we see today don't foster remote work. So people are having to live in areas where the jobs are. And when you have dual incomes in a household, you've really got to think about how that impacts where you're going to live, what job opportunities you have, which impacts affordability. And then overlay that with what's happening with insurance and property taxes and just cost of housing overall. And it's like a massive puzzle that's going to be difficult to solve. Have you ever, speaking of hair and other things, we'll see how the LinkedIn algorithm likes that. Have you ever had a necklace that gets all tangled up and you have to get like...
No bling. I'm not a bling guy.
Maybe your wife.
I know what you're talking about.
You have to untangle it. But I feel like this puzzle is a little bit like one of those necklaces that has gotten all wrapped in and of itself, and you're trying to figure out how to get it untangled. Because when you look at well, where's my job going to be? And how many days am I going to have to go in? So what does commuting look like? Right. And what is the cost of that? And how does that impact my car insurance and my homeowner's insurance and the cost of living in that area? Maybe I want to work remote and live in, the middle of the country, where in a rural community that has good internet, but my job isn't allowing for that. And how does that impact affordability?
Yeah, I love that thread, because if you think about where we were for the last 3 years, where most jobs had some either 100% remote or the ability to be remote. And it seems like more and more I'm hearing and reading and seeing where leaders of companies are kind of leaning back towards, an expectation of folks being in the office, in the facility. And so I do think that's going to be super interesting, because we've got, I'll just say from my seat, I've been in a spot where I've been able to work remote from my home office probably for the better part of the last 5+ years. And kind of like it. I don't know that I'm not sure that I would sign up for something new that required me to commute, 45 minutes like I was before in my former life, one way to work. And so I think there's all kinds of tangles in that necklace that are in consideration around, what to do with work and living, right? And especially when you start to mix in potentially where the job is in one or more of these markets that has been impacted by, natural disasters, and there's a likelihood of more of those in the future. And how do you kind of bring that all into the equation?
Well, I'm kind of the opposite. I spent a lot of my career, I want to say working remotely, but covering the bulk of the United States, if not the whole United States. And so I was traveling to different offices every week. So you were never in the same place where you commuted into a standard
Right.
office. And I kind of like being in a standard office and living in my own bed at night, and then coming into the office and being able to see, we don't have a full-time in-office policy. We're a hybrid location, though there are a lot of us who do come in every single day. But you and I are at a different point in our career. We have strong networks, and we have mentors and the phone a friend.
Yeah.
Or those just starting out who, back to our first-time homebuyer segment, they haven't built that. And are they losing out? At MBA Annual, is it last year or the year before, Malcolm Gladwell was there. And he actually talked about his experience, and he didn't think that he would be where he was today had he not been in the office.
Oh, I totally agree with that. Same for me.
So how do we provide that experience?
Well, selfish plug. I think the last word presented by Crispin Commentary is a tool for younger people in our industry who may not have the luxury of spending time, with leaders and mentors and colleagues in an office setting. I think it's this type of content. I think has a lot of value for those people. And I know we're not the only one doing it. There's dozens of these opportunities during the course of a week for young folks in our industry who, again, may not have that luxury of the face-to-face, elbow to elbow mentoring and learning. And so hopefully there's a little bit of benefit that comes out of these types of shows that helps bridge some of the gap that folks have by not having all those interactions.
I think you're exactly right. So let's say thank you to not only to Robbie and Crispin Commentary for sponsoring this, but to PRMG and FinLocker this week, who are.
Oh yeah, you like that? I snuck
those in. I like that. We got sponsors this week. But to you and to KP and Jody and all the others who spend their time, because it's not like we just pop in with no preparation. There's a lot of prep work that goes into these to make them good. But it is the opportunity for somebody to hear just how this is a lot like a conversation you and I would have if I picked up the phone and said, hey, let's talk about, what's happening in open banking, or let's talk about what's going on at MBA Annual and what sessions are you looking forward to in a couple of weeks in Denver. This is literally how we talk. This is not scripted or trying to get ratings. It's literally letting somebody in, a peek behind the curtain as to how we engage on these topics. So to your point, if you are newer to the industry or you're in a role that you would like to be to grow your leadership, this is being the fly on the wall in a room that you may not yet be invited to.
Love that. And this stuff didn't exist when we were starting out, right? But we got this from primarily being in the office and being able to sit in on, some different meetings and just have those hallway conversations that were very fluid. So let's look at our list of stuff that we haven't gotten to. Although you've done a really nice job, by the way, Christy, of weaving in some topics that our executive producer Robbie Crispin sent to us earlier this week. What else should we cover here before we wrap for the week?
Well, I think that if we're thinking about it, some of the fintech stuff, and I know that this is right up your alley, when we think about AI and how it's going to impact our business, there were a lot of things that came out this week. Elon Musk came out and said, hey, here are my cyber taxis. That's not what he called them, robo taxis, whatever they are that he launched. But we also think about what's happening with data and AI integrations into our business and in our push to become more efficient and better serve customers. We're seeing that, but you're seeing leaders come out and say, hey, I think that AI has some limited capabilities. that it can only do certain things and that the use cases are not that robust. So as a fintech executive, Ryan, what are you saying? What are you thinking about?
I love this. The timing of some of these points are awesome because I'm coming off of two conversations that I had this week where we were speculating on what, when we leave Denver in a few weeks post-conference, there's always a theme that kind of prevails through the event. And if you think about, maybe it was 3 years ago, all people talked about was blockchain. Remember that one?
Yes, that was San Diego.
And so when's the last time you heard blockchain in the context of the mortgage industry other than 30 seconds ago when I brought it up?
Probably a year.
So, and I'm not saying that we're going to be saying the same thing about AI because that's not a possibility. The AI is already in use, and frankly, has been in use to some degree in our business probably for nearly a decade in a different flavor. But one of the conversations I was having this week, we were talking about AI in the context of loan manufacturing, right? So everything from point of sale, right? Consumer raises their hand, says, I'm ready now to apply, all the way through, frankly, all the way through delivery, shipping and delivery of that loan downstream to end investors. Where we haven't heard a lot of attention on AI is kind of up funnel and where it could have some really interesting use cases and value in on the lead gen side, on the lead nurturing side, on the conversion side, that gets folks into into the loan manufacturing process. So one of the areas I'm hopeful to start to hear more about is where lenders and originators and frankly providers are leaning into AI and different applications to actually help create revenue. Because so far most of the conversation has been around cost avoidance, efficiencies, sometimes reduction in staff, but I think that's a whole different topic maybe for next week to kind of drill into. But anything you're seeing or hearing around top of funnel, the use of AI around, revenue creation or revenue growth?
Well, did you see the article and the information that has come out about what the FTC has put in around lead gen and auto dialers and the fact that consumers are going to have to opt in to every single person? So if you're doing lead gen, there's a lot to dig into there, and we don't have time in 2 minutes to get into that. But it's a fascinating topic when you think about how that could change. And for some of us, that's going to be a positive, right? I don't use an auto dialer.
Right.
You don't use an auto dialer. I know you don't contact consumers in that way anyway, but still, there are going to be some fundamental shifts where we're getting pushback from a regulatory perspective that says you can't use technology the way that you may have used it in the past. And we're going to have to think about, where do we have that human touch? Where is it the right thing to do? And where is it the business prudent thing to do versus automating the whole thing, which we know consumers don't want. So we should bring this into next week for sure.
For sure. I think when I think about the FTC changes and the impact that's going to happen there, and I actually think it not going to say it levels the playing field, but it brings the individual local originator back into play. And this is another thread that was in multiple conversations that I was having this week around this concept of a hybrid loan officer, where the loan officer is both serving their referral partners and the referrals they receive, but also becoming more of a, quote unquote, direct to consumer brand themselves. And I think these changes that are going to require consumers to opt in create an opportunity for platforms like NFM's influencer division that Greg Scher's team runs, where they're creating leads at scale through social media, through these one-to-many engagements from these personas. I think it opens the door and shines a light on the value prop there as well.
No, absolutely. I would tell our executive producer over here listening in the background, this is definitely something we should bring back next week. I think that there's a lot to explore here and an opportunity to really provide the value you and I were talking about earlier as mentors and helping people grow. Let's talk about some thought tracks and things that people should take away and start to think about and engage with their leadership or their peers about.
I love it. Well, we are at the bottom of the hour. I can't believe it went so fast. As always, Christy, when we're talking, we never run out of things to say to each other. So I appreciate you joining me today.
Can't wait to see you at MBA Annual in Denver.
Right on. Everybody, thanks for stopping by The Last Word. Enjoy. Have a productive rest of the Friday. If you're watching this over the weekend, thank you. And we'll see you next Friday. Yay.